Today we will be covering very important chapter of Foundations of Psychology, that is BPCC 131. Last lecture we spoke about the perception in block 2. Today we will be covering unit 3 in the block 2 only, that is learning. So let's see what is learning, what we can really derive from, and what is the definition and the exact conceptual knowledge of learning. Learning drives behavioral change. Learning is a key factor in modifying the entire behavior not of an individual but of an organisms. Psychologists study learning in many processes, in many ways. It contributes to our experience, and psychologists, there are research these days which make us understand about the learning better. Few definitions which is given by the psychologist. One of the definition is reported here, it's mentioned here, that is by Byron on 2001. Relatively, learning is a permanent change. When we talk about the learning, we definitely talk about the change. He says relatively permanent change in the behavior or behavioral potential resulting from experiences. So there are three different aspects which are very essential. First is relatively permanent change. Relatively permanent change is all about how we shift from our temporary learning to the permanent learning, and how there is a temporary change to the to the permanent change. Then comes the maturation based change. Here it is like growth, it excludes that. So it excludes the height which results from the aging, not learning, because when we talk about the experience driven, that includes both direct experiences and indirect experiences. So and it leads to the vicarious learning, which is also the observational learning as per the the psychologist. So learning is not only about the behavioral changes which are learned. Some changes are results from the physical maturation, not learning. For example, walking in infants is due to maturation, not learned behavior. That comes with the age, that comes with when they grow, so they'll start recognizing the colors, the objects, they start walking, they start recognizing even the parents. So learning versus maturation, when we say it is all about the biological growth and development, and learning is all about, it requires the interaction with the environmental and experiences. Overall, when we say there are four types of learnings, first is motor learning, second is verbal learning, third is conceptual learning, and fourth one is discrimination learning. So let's see in detail what are the different types of learning. When we say the motor learning, it involves acquiring new motor skills through practice or experience. It enables us to perform physical activities such as walking, running, skating, driving, climbing. Whenever a person is doing some physical activity, it involves into the motor learning. Learning here results in improved coordination and control of muscles. For example, a person started swimming or started driving. So the result of an improved coordination between their muscles as well as with the signals which they got it from the brain, that results in the learning factor. Second involves the verbal learning. Verbal learning refers to when a person involves in ability of communicating using words, sounds or pictures. This is studies through some nonsense syllables, that is high association syllables and low association syllables. High association syllables are very easy to learn, whereas there are low association syllables that is very a little harder to learn. So one of the psychologists in 1930, McCock, found that 3-letter meaningful words are learned more easily than nonsense syllables. So association value here signifies and influences how quickly a person can learn verbal material. So overall, when we say, when we connect three alphabets or three words, it's it comes to a more learned manner. Three letters are, when we connect them with a meaningful words, we can be able to learn more. For example, as it is given in the the high association syllables, that is LUV, we always associate with love. Then there is another learning that involves classifying stimuli based on shared characteristics or features. Here we when we recognize barking four-legged animal with a tall, we always recognize tail, we always recognize as a dog. Or maybe we recognize a big huge animal with a trunk and a big the physiology, or the big, they have a trunk and big ears, we always recognize them as an elephant. Speed sometimes is recognized with a lion or a tiger. So these are few things which we classify the stimuli based on the characteristics and features. It is based on cognitive interpretation and hypothesis testing. So there was a classic study which was by Austin in 1956 along with Berner and Gordno. Under 81 varying cards is number of borders, colors, shapes and figures. Participant guessed whether each card is matched a hidden concept or not. That is called conceptual learning. Conceptual learning is all about when the feedback is helped by refining the guesses, or when we get the feedback to refine the form of that. So that is when we understand the concept, when we are clear about the knowledge, that comes as conceptual understanding. Then finally, there is discrimination learning. Discrimination learning is when we refer to distinguish between different stimuli and responding appropriately. This is based on the experience and reinforcements. In 1920, the Hull, another psychologist, linked discrimination learning with conditioned learning principles. There are mainly three principles, that is reinforcement, generalization and selective discrimination. It helps us recognize and apply common elements in new context. So that is all about the different types of learning which we have just discussed. Then there are different theories of learning which was given by different psychologists. One of the very famous and very old first theory which we are doing is classical conditioning. That is given by Pavlov, also known as Pavlov's classical conditioning. Here there is another example of classical conditioning is Little Albert experiment. We will do it in the further slides. Then there is Seligman experiment with dogs with a learned helplessness. And another theory is B.F. Skinner's instrumental conditioning theory, which is also known as operant conditioning theory. And finally, we will see social learning, which is based on Bandura's social learning theory, which was given in 1977. Let's see what is Pavlov's classical conditioning. Pavlov classical conditioning was experimented on dog, and the stimuli here, the respondent, and it is Pavlovian conditioning also. It is also known like that. There is a form of learning with the association of stimuli. It involves pairing of two stimuli. Two stimuli, one is conditioned and other one is unconditioned. Conditioned is known as CS, which is conditioned stimuli. It is initially neutral but does not affect a response. Then unconditional stimuli, which we also termed as UCS, naturally and consistently elicits and known as it results to unconditional response, that is UCR. With repeated pairing of all these stimuli, the CS starts to elicit the response originally triggered only by UCS. The time gap between CS and UCS is called interstimuli interval, typically 0.5 to few seconds. So, this is a Pavlov's classical example. Pavlov attached a tube to the salivary glands of the dog, which is given in, it is shown in the picture also on the slide, where they measure the saliva. Initially, food is a UCS and salivation is a UCR. So, if you see the picture, there is a dog in the first box. It is a dog with a food. So there the excretion of saliva is there, whereas then the another box you can see a dog with a bell, which is there is no, that is a conditioned stimuli, where it is there is no saliva, there is no response on that. But when he pair the food and the bell, whenever the bell rings and the dog excrete the saliva, and later on after pairing, it's found that dog reacts when even the bell rings, and when only the bell rings, then also he is conditioned, the dog is conditioned and excrete the saliva. We can see there is certain key processes which happened in the Pavlov experiment, which is proved that any stimuli that consistently causes a reflex response serves as UCS. So, there are certain principles of this classical conditioning which happens as simultaneous conditioning, that is CS and US are presented together. Then there was trace conditioning when CS is presented before UCS with a brief gap, and there was a backward conditioning where UCS is presented before CS, which is least effective, and there was a delayed conditioning where the CS is presented first and continues until UCS is presented. Then we see the extinction. If CS is repeatedly present without UCS, the CR will weaken and disappear. Here the CR is conditioned response. In Pavlov experiment, here the bell is CS without food UCS over the lead of no salivation, and reconditioning is done if CS and UCS is pairing is reinstated and CR appears quickly, and the spontaneous recovery is done when the CR returns. Then another principle which comes in picture is generalization. So, when a new stimuli similar to the CS also elicits the CR, for example, the dog trained with a bell may also respond to a buzzer. So, it is also explained that the phobia spread with a similar stimuli. Then the final and the further principle of classical conditioning is discrimination, where the organisms leads to response only to the the programmed or the UCRs and the CRs. There is high order conditioning also, where the new CS, that is CS2, is paired with already established CS1. Here the new CS2 is buzzer or a bell, or maybe the CS1 is the food. So, eventually CS2 alone elicits a CR2, that is the bell. Whenever the bell rings, whenever the buzzer rings, the dog excrete the saliva. There is another very famous example which is known as Little Albert experiment, that is application of classical conditioning on humans. It happens on an experimental setup was like that. The subject was a 9-month-old baby, which is known as Albert. On this name only this experiment was done. In this experiment, it demonstrated the human fear can be learned through classical conditioning. It is again an example of classical conditioning, but that previously it was on animal, that is dog. Now it is on the human. So the baseline where the Albert shows no fear to any fur any mask, any rabbit or rat, anything related. But conditioning phase happened when a white rat as a neutral stimuli was presented in front of him. So simultaneously he was not fear out of that. Simultaneously there was a loud noise which comes as UCS, that is unconditional stimuli, and he started crying. When on the loud voice he started crying, Albert, the crying of Albert was a UCR, that is unconditional response to the loud voice. And after conditioning, what happens is Albert began to cry even when he see the white rat or the fur or maybe the related image, which is something related with white furs. So generalize occurred after this conditioning, that the fear extended to similar images or similar flurry objects, and and the fear appears. Here this happened after the conditioning. So little Albert experiment shows when the NS, that is a neutral stimuli, or that was white rat, there was no reaction. But when the loud noise appears in the picture, there was a crying, that is the Albert's crying, that is UCR, and the conditional stimuli, that is CS, that is a combination of white rat and the the loud noise. There was a crying and fear, and later on after conditioning, that is a conditioned response that comes. Albert had a fear, he demonstrated the fear even at the sight of the white mouse or a flurry rabbit or maybe a similar object. So implication of that was Watson argued that human behavior is shaped through SR associations, that is stimulus response associations. It includes some methods like system densitization, counter conditioning, and extinction based therapies. There is another learned helplessness concept which was experimented by Seligman with dogs. Two groups of dogs were subjected to electric shocks. Group 1 received inescapable shocks and could not avoid the shocks no matter what they did. Then group 2 did not receive inescapable shocks, had no such prior helplessness experience. Later on, it's seen that all the dogs were given an opportunity to escape, but only group 2 can take the action in response of that, when they give an opportunity to escape. So it was, it was proposed in 1960s during experiments involving classical conditioning when it was doing, when the Pavlov was working with dogs. So it defined the learned response where an individual fails to take action to avoid the aversive stimuli and due to previous experiences of inescapable failure. That was the group 1 didn't take the action when they were given the opportunity to escape. There is another experiment that we saw in the further slides, that is, I just show you the another theory, that is operant conditioning as B.F. Skinner operant theory. So B.F. Skinner operant theory also refers to the instrumental learning. It is actually involves the consequences behavior as is influenced by reinforcement following an action. So the B.F. Skinner actually worked mainly on the reinforcement, where it refers to any stimuli or any event that increases the likelihood of behavior reoccurring. When the behavior reoccurs, there can be two type of reinforcement happen. It can be positive, it can be negative. Positive reinforcement is all about adding a pleasant stimuli. That is, we have seen a carrot for a rabbit after running. And negative reinforcement is removing an unpleasant stimuli. That not to be confused with punishment. Punishment is absolutely different. It is that's a different concept if we see from this point of view. So behavior is more likely to repeat if reinforcement is less likely or it is not reinforced or it is punished. So, B.F. Skinner experiment, there is a Skinner box. A rat is placed with a lever and the food dispenser. Initially what happens is the food is dispensed manually when the lever is pressed. Once the rat learns the association, it begins the it press the lever on its own, and reinforcement is given only when the lever is pressed. So, here the measurement of behavior is done on the cumulative reorder to track the rate of responding, the number of times the rat presses the lever per unit of time. This method quantifies learning through observable behavior. There were certain examples of reinforcement when we see around also in the human behavior. A child gets a smile or a praise after answering correctly, and they are likely to repeat that behavior. So, here it is very common example which goes with a child behavior. If they get the praise after answering, so they repeat the same behavior, or maybe we can see the the behavior of the parents of small children, if they whenever they react on any such behavior, that a child gets a positive reinforcement, and that particular the behavior is repeated by the child. It also relates with the shaping behavior, because operant conditioning, when we really gets into the overall conditioning of a behavior, it also relates with shaping of that behavior. Shaping is the process of enforcing successive approximations of the desired behavior. Step by step, reinforcement of simple behavior builds the final complex behavior. It is used to teach children, develop language, influence attitudes, and shape beliefs. For example, reinforcing every small step of a child, it takes while learning to walk. So, when we reinforce, when we reacts on a child or when we motivate them in a way that on every step of a child, then it shapes their behavior to learn to further to take the further steps, or they learn to walk. Then there is stimuli generalization and discrimination. Stimuli generalization is behavior reinforced in presence of stimuli, also occurs in presence of similar stimuli, whereas the similar discrimination is learning is respond only when a specific stimuli is present. It occurs when response is reinforced in one situation but not in another. So, when we talk about the reinforcements, there are different types of reinforcement. One is primary and another one is secondary reinforcer. So, primary reinforcer is naturally satisfying and fulfills the biological needs. For example, the food satisfies the hunger, whereas there are secondary reinforcers which gains value through association with primary reinforcers. That is one of the example is money. Money is for the adults, and sometimes the toys are for the children. Here the money is a secondary reinforcer because it used to buy the other things, for example the food, the toys, or maybe the clothes or anything related to it. One can always buy anything from a money, so it is considered to be as a secondary reinforcer. So, whatever associate with a primary reinforcer which gains the value through that is the secondary reinforcers. So, reinforcements, when we see overall, there is CRF, that is continuous reinforcement. There is fixed ratio, that is then it is fixed interval, which is known to be as FI, then variable ratios, that is VR, and variable interval, that is VI. When we say continuous reinforcements, it affects on a behavior of a fast learning. It affects on quick extinction when the reinforcement stops, because here every correct response is reinforced. Whenever there is a response, it is reinforced, and there is a fast learning on that, because it is also said that the child, when a child is motivated and if they are praised by the teacher, so they learn very quickly or very fast. Then there is fixed ratio. It produces a high response rate with short pauses after response, the reinforcements. Here the reinforcement happened after a fixed number of responses. For example, the third or the fourth response. So it happened with a fixed interval. It happens with a fixed number of responses. Then is fixed interval. Fixed interval is fixed time intervals. Maybe after every 2 minutes. Which is regardless to responses made. So here the effect on behavior is uneven performance. Here it is seen because the interval is sometimes cannot be able to reinforce, and as per this schedule the uneven performance is shown. Variable ratio is when the reinforcement after a varying number of responses. It leads to high steady responses and most resistant to extinction. The final is variable interval. Variable interval is reinforcement after unpredictable time intervals, that is after a minute or maybe 3 minutes or maybe 2 minutes, etc. So the behavior happens to be as it produces steady and moderate response rates. So here this is all about the effect of behavior of different reinforcements schedules. Then finally there is a social learning theory. Social learning theory is Bandura's, which is given by in 1977. This theory emphasizes that learning occurs in social context through observation. It is also known as observational learning, or it is also known as modeling. There is a key mechanism behind observational learning. The learning happens by observing others and the consequences of their actions, the way they react or the way they behave. There are two types of observation. One is direct observation, when we watch a person, we watch a model, and we started performing in the same way as they perform. Then there is indirect observation, that we also call it vicarious learning, that is learning through experiences, learning through the descriptions given by the different people. So there are different examples of vicarious learning which is seen in our daily life. Somebody guided us, or maybe the parents are guiding to a child, that is the indirect observation, and relates with the vicarious learning, that is learning from their experiences, so that the same mistake cannot be happen. But the direct observation is we start imitating a person, we start behaving like a person, for example a model, or it is very much seen in the when a person is behaving on a stage or performance. So that is done by the actors, that is the direct observation. Models in social learning is a behavior, individual behavior whose behavior is observed are called models. The models are those people whom a person wanted to behave like, or they wanted to imitate. They are also known to be as role models. That includes maybe the parents, the teachers, the colleagues, the film actors, or maybe the sports person or any celebrity. Any significant person in one's environment, that is called model. A model can influence pro-social behavior or anti-social behavior. That can, when we say pro-social behavior, it directly reflects with a kindness or empathy or helping nature or something like that. And when we talk about the anti-social behavior, one of the example is aggression. So models influence both the behaviors, and it is all about how an individual adapt that behavior and wanted to behave like that. They observe that behavior. So there are 4 essential cognitive processes when we get into observational learning. First is attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. So attention is when when an individual is focusing on model's behavior. Overall, the behavior is when focused, that is the attentive stage, that is the process when the attention is moving on. Then is retention, remembering the observed behavior. It is they observe, they see the behavior, and they remember that particular behavior or that particular action what they did. Then is reproduction, where they replicate the same, where the after remembering or after retaining that particular behavior, they can be able to react in the same way, or they typically replicate that same behavior. And finally is the motivation, where it is based on expected rewards or punishments. So here the cognitive process goes along with all the four stages, that is attention, retention, reproduction and motivation. Attention is when we observe, when we focus. Attention is when we remember that particular behavior. Reproduction is when we are replicating that behavior, and motivation is what reward we are getting out of it. So there is another example which is a very landmark study in psychology that is conducted on 72 children, that is the age group of 3 to 6 years. So there were some random assignments given to all the three groups. These three groups were one group is exposed to aggressive model, second group is exposed to non-aggressive model, and third group is the very controlled group. There is no model shown. So the first group, the procedure is like that. The first group shown a video model physically and verbally attacking a Bobo doll, that is either punching or hitting or using abusive language. Whereas the group 2 is shown a video model playing calmly and gently with a Bobo doll. Whereas the group 3, it was not shown any video or model. It was neutral. They were not shown even the negative, where physically and verbally attacking the Bobo doll, and group 2, no action was shown which is very gentle to the Bobo doll. So the testing phase, then comes the testing phase. So all the children were placed in the room which is full of toys, including the Bobo dolls. So what is observed, and the findings were like, children exposed to the aggressive behavior, they imitated the aggressive behavior, they engage in hitting, punching, abusing, abusive speech directed at the Bobo doll. Children exposed to non-aggressive model, which is showed peaceful behavior, no aggression towards the ball, and the control group shows that they didn't exhibit any significant aggressive or kindness behavior or a peaceful behavior towards that Bobo doll. So the conclusion of this study confirms that observational learning and imitation learning are very powerful sources in acquiring social behavior. Children learn by watching others even without direct enforcement. Even if they are not enforced, but they learn by watching others. They learn by people how they behave. It is well said that the children really learn, more from their home, or maybe where they are spending more time. So the kind of behavior it is seen, they see at the home, probably they sometimes replicate the same behavior at the other settings, maybe at the school or within the friends or any other settings. So it established the foundation of social learning theory, where particularly its application to aggression and behavior modeling is done, where the behavior is modeled, where the behavior is shaped towards that particular behavior. So it is also seen in other settings like workplace settings, and the people are very happy when they get a very good organization culture. Or maybe if we talk about the children's setting, so if they are very very good performers, or they are very have a very growth mindset, if they get a very happy environment at home. So it is all about confirming the observational learning and imitating the powerful forces of acquiring that particular behavior which they have learned. So when we say cognitive learning, because now the theories have done, we have completed the 3 theories. Now let's understand what is cognitive learning. Cognitive learning is mainly bifurcated into 2 types of learning, that is latent learning and insight learning. So latent learning is was the chief of the learning in a form of immediately express the overt behavior motivation to demonstrate it. Tolman and Hanzik did this experiment. The objective to demonstrate that learning is how the people really behave without enforcement. For example, there was a method which actually undergone this is subjects were hungry, and the design was a complex maze with 3 groups. So findings of this latent learning, latent refers to the hidden learning. The reward group showed a gradual and consistent improvement in speed and accuracy. Then there was no reward group showed minimal improvement. The no reward or reward group showed with little improvement until food we introduced, and after which their performance improved dramatically, matching the reward group. So overall, the conclusion that the rat in the no reward or reward condition, they shows the gradual consistent and improvement of their speed and accuracy. Whether they show there was a latent learning, whether they are rewarded or they are not rewarded, whether they are rewarded with the food or not, but there was an latent learning of the way they are behaving, the way they are have little improvement on every after which their performance was improved after every action, whether it was reward or non-reward. Then the another theory, that is the insight learning. Insight learning is a sudden realization of the solution to a problem rather than through trial and error or conditioning. We learn either by our problems, we either learn by the issues happen when we do something, or sometimes we all of a sudden we do the trial and error, or we start working on how we are conditioned and how we are performed, or maybe we see others and we observe them. But when it comes to be the sudden realization of any solution to a problem, that is insight learning. That comes from inside. That is not always a gradual process. It involves a cognitive restructuring of the problem, which really relates to a wow moment, or it relates sometimes I got the solution. That is the aha moment for everyone. So one of the example was which is shown in this figure is done on chimpanzee, which is also known as Kohler's chimpanzee experiment. Here chimpanzee is taken as an experiment subject because it is closely related with humans. It is closely related with human behavior. So the setup is, if you see this picture, the banana hung out of reach inside the cage, and the wooden boxes are placed inside the cage. So that is the setup which is given to them. Now what happens is, the chimpanzee did not learn through reinforcement or repetitions. Instead, it mentally visualized the problem of a solution. That what is the problem? The problem is, he cannot reach while standing on a floor to the banana. Now, leading to the correct action, that is the mentally, if he mentally visualized that problem of a solution and he changed the behavior, he piled up all the boxes and stand on that, and you see in the third picture, it is seen that he can be able to reach to the banana to eat. Now here it is a attempt from the chimpanzee only, while within this problem and with the change in the behavior, he comes with a solution. That is the insight learning, and that is very abrupt and very long lasting. So the main significance of insight learning, it is an internal cognitive process. It emphasizes more on your inner learning. What comes from inside, and what is one can always find out the solution, which is based on the cognitive processes of an individual. There are certain strategies in learning after understanding about the latent learning and insight learning. Different strategies are given in the learning, that is also called as mental imagery. Mental imagery refers to the ability to visualize situations or objects or information in the mind without direct sensory input. It plays a crucial role in memory, solving problems, whatever is coming on the way, and the learnings. There are a lot of illustrative examples we can come around in our daily life also. For example, one of the illustrative question is, how many windows are in your house? You likely answer to imagine a mental tour of your house and counting the windows of each room, and you can be able to give the instant answer out of this. That is when we create an image of that particular object or particular information, there we plays a very important role of our memory, of our learning as well. There is another example which is very common. How many vowels are there in the spelling of 100? I mean, if we visualize the word 100, so how many vowels are there? We know the conceptual knowledge about that the vowels are A, E, I, O, U, and there are 4 vowels. If we say, if we visualize or we see, that particular word, that is O, N, E, H, U, N, D, R, E, D. So there are 4 vowels in that. That is O, E, U, and again E. There are certain key sites when we talk about the mental imagery. Imagery refers directly with the pictures, that reflects with the images. It would be very difficult to answer questions where we cannot be able to create the mental imagery. When we cannot create the mental image. Studies indicate that those who can create the vivid mental images tend to learn more effectively. Mental imagery supports deeper cognitive processing and enhances memory retention. Process of learning through imagery is reading the information, mentally form the visual image, that is representing that particular image in our mind, and then we process the learning, we learn from that particular visualizations. So this process of learning through creating the images is reading the information, then mentally from the visual image that represents that information, then we learn from the accurate image or maybe the detailed image of any information, any object or any situation. When we say it happens within sometimes with a fraction of few seconds, because the things we have already learned, we already know the concept, it's very easy to visualize that particular image, but sometimes we create a very abrupt images which we haven't learned. But for example, a person is never been to a place which have a very high mountains, but what is mountain, what is the height of a mountain, how the mountains looks like. But and when a person is asked to visualize that particular image, the information is all about a person is standing in surrounded by big high snowy mountains. He knows about the information what the mountains look like, but never been to that place. So creating a mental image of that situation is mentally imaging that visual image of that situation. He can always see himself or herself and surround by the mountain with the snow on that, with the white snow, with the if it's a snow, he is wearing a jacket or maybe a cap and snow boots and all. So this is all about he mentally creates an image, the visual image which represents that particular information. Then there is development perspective. Research shows that older student benefits more from imaginary based learning strategies. This is because they can form more complex and integrated images, improving the understanding and memory. Now this development is the older students benefits more out of it because they have their own experiences, they have their own development, and they can form more integrated images based on their experiences, based on their understanding, based on their learned memory. So the mental imagery is used almost everywhere. It is used in education, it is used in creating the mnemonics, it is used in problem solving, and it can be used at the creative thinking. For example, a child is asked to give a situation, if you have for example, if you have any maybe a situation based and they ask them to create or maybe visualize that particular situation, that you are in that situation, how you come out of that. So these mental imagery situations can be created, and they are asked to find out the solution out of that. That increases the problem solving skills of children or maybe in the adults as well. In education, it is sometimes it is seen that the teacher gives the props question that on that particular page or that particular textbook in that particular chapter there is one diagram with a blue base out of it, and there was one boy who was working on in the chemistry lab. So a student sometimes create that image based on, because they have read based on the memory, because they have read that book, or they comes with the the answers out of it. Overall, there is another strategy that is called rehearsals. Rehearsals is repeating information to keep it active in memory or to encode it for the long term. Here when we say the rehearsals are simple repetition of information, and there is another type of rehearsal, but let's see what is repetition. That is keep information with short term memory and but does not aid it to deep learning. For example, repeating the phone numbers over and over to the to remember it briefly, for a quick referencing. So but the elaborative rehearsal is more into deep processing of information. Elaborative information or elaborative rehearsals enhances the understanding. It is not only memorizing the things, it creates some meaningful associations, it improves the recall and retention. The technique is also known as elaborative interrogations also, because here when a person is rehearsing on this, when they are really working on the deep processing of the information, they ask why about those things, why they a question on that particular material where which they wanted to ask or they wanted to remember. So they ask the why again and again. That is why it is called interrogation also. Then there is application in learning, where we use elaborative rehearsals for studying or concepts or definitions or specific theory. For example, here only let's do a live interrogative elaborative interrogation. That is, if I say that there was a theory which was given by one of the psychologists which worked on the dog with the food and the bell. So what was the name of that theory? Here the theory, the rehearsal is done on the application of memorizing in the learning. Here I can incorporate the self-questioning. Okay, there was a dog, there was a bell, there was a food in front of that. So this creates, it may create an image of that. I rehearse on that, I deep down into what I have learned, and I come with, that was a classical conditioning example given by Ivan Pavlov, that I was learned, but here I am rehearsing on the same thing with a elaborative manner. It is very ideal for the students, the trainers, the lifelong learners who aim to retain information for the long term, because it is more of a conceptual learning, more of a context, because they are using that information on and on on a repetitive mode, and on the more every time on a elaborative manner, because they are talking about the concepts, they talk about the theories, they talk about the the definitions, or maybe the conceptual knowledge of that particular subjects. So it is very very well applicable to all these people. Then there is another strategy, that is organization. This is a cognitive strategy of better learning. Organization involves a restructuring or categorizing the things, information in a way that makes it easier to remember and retrieve. So how it works? It works like when we categorize, when we associate some material, it helps to convert the random information into a structured and manageable format. For example, when we say cities, we automatically comes to our mind the Delhi, Ludhiana, Greenwich, London. When we say animals, it comes, or the birds, it comes as ostrich, yak, all. So there are others, like the other categorization is a general words. Then it is organization is also when we are creating acronyms, or we are mnemonics creations are there. Take the first letters, and when we create the memories out of that phrases, or that if I wanted to remember D8OLLYGO, so instead of remembering these alphabets, I create a memorable word or a phrase, that is Dolly Go. So I'll always remember this particular phrase or a word where all the alphabets are related to that, and I can be able to memorize it in a better way. This is also used for the recalling, when it is into the single cure, and the organization enhances the overall learning. Then there is cognitive base, which supports the brain and connects with information in existing mental frameworks. It also facilitates the encoding by creating logical associations. The mind maps, the hierarchies, the tables, the mnemonics, and the group vocabulary by themes are involved in cognitive basis learning. So overall, when we have learned about the strategies in learning organization, we learned about the theory, we learned about the concept of learning, which is a lasting change in the behavior, not only because of the conceptual knowledge or the the experiences. It is also about how we can be able to change our behavior for a long term due to experiences as well. We learned about the classical conditioning theory, which was given by Pavlov, to other theories we have done on Alberts, and then we did the Skinner's operant conditioning that happens through rewards and punishment. We talk about how a child learns on clean their rooms to get a treat. So this is all about the operant conditioning, how they are they happens to when they are either rewarded or they get positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement. Then we learned helplessness, that is given by Seligman, which when someone gives up trying after repeated failures, or examine a student stop studying because they always fail. We also learned about the Bandura social learning. We learn by watching others. For example, a child learn to say thank you, or maybe any other specific words when they see their parents to do in the same manner. Or maybe if a child sees their parents are doing a lot of charity, so they learned that behavior, they do the charity, and they are programmed with that particular learning. Cognitive learning it involves the thinking and understanding of the concepts. It's involved the processes. Then we learned about the latent learning and insight learning. Latent learning is that shows up later when needed. It is for a short term occurrence, whereas the insight learning is when we really understand the solution of a problem, when we really get the wow moment out of any problem. So there are different ways to improve the learning also. We can use pictures in our mind. We can visualize that pictures. That is called mental imaginary. Then there is another ways to improve learning, that is practice, which is often taken as a rehearsals. Rehearsals can be done in either ways, different ways. Then there is group, which is very similar things. We categorize, we organize things. We also talk about about the strategies which is given on cognitive based categorization, memorizing, creating the acronyms. And there is another concept which we call it chunking, where we reduce the cognitive load by transforming the bigger information or a large information into different chunks. So chunks can be done in 3 or 4 words. For example, I wanted to learn the entire paragraph, so I chunk it into few important words and relates with them. There is also another way of learning, that is making the stories and then visualizing those stories. So creating a stories of a specific concept is again relates with the cognitive process, and it is a combination of organizing that information to enhance that particular learning. So overall, the strategies of learning, which is not only mental imaginary, but creating the situation and visualizing the objects and information, and to plays a crucial role, that is very important when we get into either it is and it's very important when it gets into the types of learning, when we get into either insight learning or we get into the latent learning. So learning is very important concept, not only in terms of conceptual knowledge, in terms of models of training or strategies of training or individuals whose behaviors are observed or changing the behavior or influencing the behaviors. It is also about how we continuously shaped our behavior accordingly, how we are programmed with that particular behavior on that, maybe because of the positive reinforcements or negative reinforcements, or what is the effect of behavior after these reinforcements, what was the learning after these reinforcements is very important. So learning overall is shaping the behavior. It is overall shaping the sometimes the complex situation into the simplest situation and developing the influence and developing the beliefs for an individual. So there are few theories which we have learned in detail on the human, on the animals, given by the different psychologists, a very well-known psychologists, which is very much available in the textbooks also, and it is very detailed experiments which was given by different psychologists. So when we really talk about referring all these things, so it is finally relates with how we can be able to program our behavior, how we can shape our behavior through reinforcements, through learning, through strategies, and through different learning by different theories. So that's all for today, and thank you so much.